Hey guys, we're going to be taking a look at the Lifetime 55 quart cooler next, so stick around. Hey guys, welcome to Rough Riders. I'm Jay Taylor. If this is your first time here, thanks for stopping by, and if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. So my wife and I are getting ready to do a couple of back-to-back camping trips. One for this weekend, and then when we get back from that, we're going to unpack, repack, and leave that evening to head out for a week-long trip. And I decided I needed a cooler because where I was going, I couldn't use my Dometic refrigerator. There's no AC. And so I wanted something that was going to, keep the ice for us for that entire trip, or for both of those trips. And so I started looking around at all the different coolers. I looked at Yeti, I looked at Arctic, I looked at Orca, and a number of the rotomolded coolers. Then I started looking at some of the mainstream traditional cooler guys, the Igloos and stuff like that, and the Colemans. And I ended up settling on this Lifetime 55 quart cooler. It seemed kind of like the best of both worlds, where it was affordable, yet it had really good ice retention according to all of the ice retention tests. Now, if you're like me and you've done a bunch of the research and looked at these coolers, you know that this guy is supposed to hold ice for 7 to 9 days, depending on which testing video you watched. So it's supposed to have great performance, similar to that of a rotomolded cooler at less than half the cost. So I thought I would do a quick review of this thing, but what I wanted to do in this video, in which I didn't really see, is kind of real world tests. In the ice retention tests, they kind of do everything right. They pre-chill the cooler, they load it up with ice, and only ice, and maybe a couple of bottles of water or something like that. And then they only check it a couple of days. They put it outside and let it run, which is great because it does hold everybody to that same sort of condition to give you an idea how well they perform against one another. But it's not a real world test because they're not getting in and out of it like you would on a normal trip. And they're not just loading it up and going and things like that. So I thought with this particular video, then what I would do is I would do essentially two tests. One would be over this weekend, this first trip. We're getting ready to leave in a couple hours here, and I have not pre-chilled this cooler. I have not loaded it up or anything like that. So I'm just going to load it up with my stuff, throw the ice in, and we'll be getting in and out of it for drinks and cooking and pulling our food out and everything. So it's going to be a real world test of how this thing does on a regular weekend trip. Then when we get back, we come back on Sunday. We turn around and repack and go back out Sunday night, where we're heading to Yellowstone, and I'll be doing a review of that campground as well, so stick around for that. But in that particular trip, since the cooler will already be pre-cooled from the previous weekend, I'm going to reload it up, repack it up with our stuff, and reload it up with ice, and then we'll be getting, again, in and out of it all week long, and we'll see how it does for that as well. So we'll take a look at both of those in this video, and really trying to give you a sense of how this thing does for both weekend trips as well as a week-long camping trip. So do stick around for the rest of this video, and we'll get into it. But first, let's take a look at the specs of this cooler and give you an overview of kind of what we're starting with. Okay, so quick review or quick look at this cooler. It's a 55 quart. According to the label, holds ice up to 7 days, holds up to 60 cans with ice. It comes with a 5-year warranty. I was specifically looking for a cooler that was made in the USA, so that's why I almost went with the Arctic, but I really wanted a cooler that was made in the US. So that's why I chose this one. It was $97 at Walmart, so sub $100 on the price point. I do like this latching system. Instead of you got to stretch down the rubber holders on some of the rotomolded coolers. This is really nice and convenient. You can operate it with one hand. It's got a nice seal on the inside. It's fairly sizable for roomy inside, considering you got the bottle opener with it as well. This is not rotomolded. This is, I think this is an injection mold, and then insulated with the same polymer insulation that you find in the rotomolded cooler. So overall, it's you know, should be pretty good. On the inside, you can see it's fairly roomy, and I'll post the actual measurements from the website as well, so you can get a sense of that. You've got your rope handles. I'm not a big fan of the rope handles myself. I think, you know, they're just they're too loose. You can't get a good grip. It does have a sizable drain plug on it right here. And one thing that I like about this, one, is that it's attached, and two, it's the size of a garden hose, so you can actually use a hose to drain it if you wanted to. So, and then it's got a nice seal and stuff on it as well. So hopefully this thing will work as good as it says, but we're going to find that out as we start loading this thing up. So I'm going to go ahead and start filling it up right now with our food for this weekend. I'm doing some baby back ribs, so that we're going to smoke. So those are already frozen, so I'm going to put those in here, and that'll actually help keep everything cold. And then most of our drinks and everything are already pre-chilled and stuff as well, so I'll pop those in here along with the rest of our condiments and everything for what we're doing this weekend, and we'll see how it does. Okay, to give you a sense of the starting conditions, all I got to do is add ice now. So I've got a handful of drinks that were sitting in our fridge that were already, so those are already pre-chilled. I've got our condiments and everything. Those were all in the fridge and pre-chilled. I've got 2 racks of ribs in here that were frozen. Then I've got some eggs and chorizo for our breakfast, and then we got some hot dogs. And so that's what we're doing for this weekend. Again, most of the stuff is pre-chilled, but the cooler has not been. So I'm just going to add a couple of bags of ice. Okay, so here it is, Sunday at about 1 o'clock. I had filled this up. I put in about 20 pounds of ice in here on Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we camped all weekend. We just got back a little bit ago, and so I wanted to give you guys a quick look of how much ice melted during this weekend trip. Now, we were in and out of this thing a lot. You know, this was holding our food, our drinks, and everything for the weekend, so we were in and out of this thing getting our drinks and pulling food out, pulling snacks out, and all of that sort of thing. So we were in and out of this thing a lot. The weather over the weekend where we were, it was in the mid-80s, and this thing was in the sun, out of the sun. As I took off to go riding on the dirt bike, you know, I wasn't around for several hours, and so this thing just sat in the sun. And if I saw it in the sun, I would move it into, you know, into the shade, but it wasn't something that I was, you know, specifically trying to just make the ice last as long as it could. I just wanted to get a sense of what a real world weekend performance was like. So this is pretty much what we've got going on. You can see there's still a lot of ice left. I threw that over. You can see we got about 2 inches of water. So we lost, you know, a little bit of ice, maybe 1% or something, but most of it is still here. So it did really well for a weekend trip. Next up, you know, stick around for part 2, because we are going to be taking this thing to Yosemite. It's now pre-chilled, so I'm going to pull all this ice out. I'm going to reload it back up now that the cooler's been, you know, chilled with ice for a while, and we'll see how it does over the next 5 days and see how the ice does. I apologize that I didn't get a shot of the cooler full of ice with all the stuff on the bottom, but as you saw in the video, you know the food and everything was probably stacked up to about here. So you know, it was just enough for the 20-pound bag. I think with the ice, you know, it came up to here. I probably could have got another 3 to 5 pounds of ice in at most. And but you know, we still got most of our ice left, so it actually did pretty well over the weekend. This time we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going away for 5 days. I just got back today from the weekend trip, and now I'm heading back out. So I'm only been home for a few hours. I'm just reloading and loading back up and heading back out. So the ice was basically, the cooler was still pre-chilled from all the ice and everything I had in it before. So now we're going to see how this thing does over the next 5 days. Now this time I've got the cooler really packed full, And so I'm not going to be able to get 20 pounds of ice in it like I did last time. This time I'll be lucky if I get in 10. So we're going to see how this thing holds up over 5 days with 10 pounds of ice. And you know, if I have to refill it or anything like that, we'll see that in the video. Okay, you can see I've got this thing packed full. We've got a lot of veggies and fruits. We've got some frozen meals down at the very bottom. We've got a lot of cherries and grapes and salsa and some condiments and all sorts of things going on here. This thing is packed really, really full. I think at best I'm going to be able to get is 10 pounds of ice in this thing. And so we'll see how that holds up you know, through the course of the next 5 days. But you know, everything is already cooled, so everything came straight out of the fridge. The cooler was already cold because it had ice in it and everything from the previous trip. So it'll be an interesting test to see how this works in a real world environment as we head off to Yellowstone for 5 days. So let's see how this thing goes. Okay, so we pulled out last night around 8 o'clock at night, and in our hurry to get out the door, we forgot to stop and get ice. So we drove until about 1 in the morning, and then we got up about 6 and stopped, I don't know, about 7:30. We put about 10 pounds of ice in. So this is kind of what we're starting with. So a lot of the ice has filtered down to the bottom because we pulled stuff out. But that's our starting condition. Right now, it's, you know, we're up in the Grand Teton Mountains, and it's about 38 degrees. And so not a whole lot of sun. So this should last a while, you know, until we get to Yellowstone for sure. Okay guys, back with a cooler update on the Lifetime cooler. So this is day 4. We did, as I mentioned, we forgot to put ice in it when we left Sunday night, so it didn't end up getting ice until Monday morning about 7 a.m. It's now Friday, right about the same time, about 7 a.m. So we've had a good 4 solid days of use out of this cooler, and we did not put any additional ice in. So let's take a look at how much ice is left after kind of a normal use for the week. Now this was an 8-pound bag that we put in, and you can see we've got, you know, quite a bit of ice left. There's about 2 inches of water after 4 days of use. Now this is getting in and out of it the entire time. Fixing our dinners and all that kind of stuff, so normal, you know, use case. The weather here has been a mixed bag. So it's been, you know, the first couple of days it was really, really cold. It actually even snowed a little bit when we first got here. We pulled in Monday about 3 p.m. and we did have a little bit of snow that morning or that afternoon. And then it rained the first couple of nights on us, and so it's been in the mid 40s, I think, during most of the time. It's been stored in the bear box over there, and you can see it gets plenty of shade all day long. So, you know, that's kind of the environment we're going in. Now, for comparison, I've got my daughter's cooler. This is my old cooler that I gave to her. She filled up Sunday night with ice with a 20-pound bag, and did not add any ice. And you can see, you know, she's got, you know, quite a bit of ice left as well, but she's also seen a lot more melting. But, you know, again, she didn't have to refill. Everything stayed nice and cold with this igloo. And you can see, you know, it's a similar size, not quite as big as the 55 quart. The walls obviously are not as thick, so it's not quite as insulated, but you know, that's kind of a quick comparison between the two. Okay, we're back from our trip to Yellowstone, and one other test I wanted to do as part of this review was a leak test. And so I've got all the water in here that melted from the ice. It's probably up to about here, so probably about 3-4 inches of water. And we're gonna kind of flip this thing all around and see if it leaks and how that does. So let's test that right now. Okay, so first off, pavement's still dry on the front. Okay, we did get a little leaking out of the side. So a little bit of leaking, just a very little bit right there. Move it forward just to make sure I'm not getting the same. That might be a fresh drip right there. Yeah, a little bit of dripping right there. And then a lot more leaking out of the back. But overall, not bad at all. So, sealed up pretty well, and you can see I actually had to turn this thing really upside down in order to get it to leak. Just kind of so it looks like just the back is kind of where it leaks the most. The sides and the front held up really well. So that's how I did on the leak test. Okay, some final thoughts. Overall, this is a great cooler for the price point. So given that it was 97 bucks at Walmart, it was nearly a third the cost of a high-end rotomolded cooler like a Yeti or an Orca. The performance was, I would say, pretty solid. So for the weekend trip, again, it was the weather was hot. It was in and out of the sun. We were getting in and out of this thing all day long, and we still had most of the ice left. In the week-long trip, again, same thing. Obviously, the temperatures were vastly different, and it wasn't in the sun. But I also started off with less than half the amount of ice on the week-long trip. I had a 20-pound bag in there. On the week-long trip, I had an 8-pound bag in there, and it kept everything cool the entire week. Now, granted, in that particular scenario, we were up in Yellowstone, and it wasn't out in the sun. The weather was much more mild, but it still kept everything cold. I never had to replace the ice, and when I still got it home, there was still ice in it. It's now 2 days since we've been back, and the water, I just emptied it, and the water was actually still cold. So the performance on this thing is very solid. So I would highly recommend this cooler for those that are looking for a cooler that will give really good performance at a really good price point. It's sturdy, it's very well built. I love the latch system. Not a fan of the rope handles, but that's what they're all doing. But it does have molded in plastic handles as well that you can carry it by. So yeah, this is definitely a worthwhile buy. So there you have it. If you enjoyed this review, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.